Morning, class. Today we are going to read about something that happens in a different country. It's way across on the other side of the world. It's a country called Mongolia. And I'm just going to show you really quick a map of Mongolia. It's right there. And it's nestled between Russia and China, sort of sandwiched between those two countries. Okay? So the name of the book is called Horse Song, The Naadam of Mongolia by Ted and Betsy Lewin. Feel the ground tremble as dust surrounds everything around you. A swarm of horses ridden by kids as young as 7 years old roars across the desert right past you. What would that be like? Ted and Betsy know because they traveled to Mongolia to see a race just like this. This is a story called Horse Songs. Mongolia, the captivating land, is one of the few unspoiled wilderness areas in the world. The landscape ranges from snow-capped mountains and dense forests to wide open steppe and the sandy soils of the Gobi Desert. It is home to perhaps the last horse culture on earth. What do you think the author means by horse culture? The people are warm and friendly. Out of a population of more than 2.5 million, about 1/3 lives in the capital of Ulaanbaatar. The rest are nomads who travel the vast countryside with their livestock and portable felt tents called gurs. They carry with them only the most essential possessions, including richly ornamented everyday objects such as knives and saddles, and hand-carved and colorfully painted stools and tables. Mongolian nomads and their horses are inseparable. Never shout at your horse, people say. It's your best friend. The horses are used for transportation and racing. They are small and have great strength and stamina, but are very uncomfortable to ride. To overcome this, riders often stand in the stirrups of their saddles while their horses trot. Riders need very strong leg muscles to do this. Every summer, Naadam festivals are held all around Mongolia to celebrate the country's most popular sports: wrestling, archery, and horse racing. The Naadam brings isolated nomads together to take part in the events. See friends and relatives, feast and celebrate life. It is a time for Mongolians to remember centuries of tradition and keep their cultural heritage alive. In the horse racing events, boys and girls race half-wild horses across the treeless steppe for honor and glory. It is the legendary child jockeys we have come so far to see. So can you imagine that being part of your job as a child to take part in one of these races? Arrival. Are you Betsy and Ted? Asks a young woman as she steps from the crowd at the Ulaanbaatar airport. I'm your guide. My name is Batsurin. It means fire warrior. It's a boy name. My mother consulted a shaman before I was born, and I was told I would be a boy. Batsurin laughs and then gestures to a giant of a man with shaved head. This is Amara, our driver. Amara means peaceful mind. So off we go with Fire Warrior and Peaceful Mind on our great Mongolian adventure. Our trip is 800 bumpy roadless miles in a minivan. Along the way, we encounter herds of horses, hayneks, yaks, 2 humpback camels, and Mongolian 4-eyed dogs. Can you imagine 4-eyed dogs? We see nomads on horseback wearing long robes called deals and general's hat called janjans, malgas, and are astonished by the throat singers playing horsehead fiddles. We find bones of dead horses, play dice games with sheep knuckles, and sleep in gur camps on the Onjin steppe with crickets as big as cucumbers. We see black vultures with 10-foot wingspans. In the Gobi, we marvel at the flaming cliffs dense with dinosaur fossils. These days, 3 days later, We finally reach our destination, the camp of the horse trainers. Real quick, if you have a moment, take 10 paces across the room and see how wide that wingspan is of a vulture. Camp of the horse trainers. It's early morning on the steppe. We are awakened by mooing cows and bleating goats. As we crawl out of our little tent by the river, Amra is fetching water and Butsarin is cooking breakfast. Suddenly, we are surrounded by a large herd of horses that has come to the river to drink. Choo-choo, Butsarin yells, shooing away the horses. Choo-choo! There is a stirring in the gers of the nomad family we are visiting. Grandma and Grandpa sleep in one ger, the rest of the family in another. The fires in the stoves are stoked, and everyone is getting ready for another long day. 9-year-old Tamir, home from boarding school in town for the summer break, has much to do before he can tend to his racehorse, the special one he will ride in the Naadam. He and the other children must milk the cows and goats and then drive them out to pasture. Tamir returns and leads some of the horses down to the river for watering. The members of Tamir's family ate some of the best horse trainers in the country. They welcome us into their ger. Sambayo, they say. Hello. Sambayo, we reply. We're offered the traditional bowl of Arag, a fermented drink made from mare's milk, plus a dish of curds and lumps of sugar. The Arag tastes like watery, fizzy yogurt and smells faintly of horses because it's made out of horse milk. Grandma is making fresh curds from the morning's milking of the cows and goats. These cheese-like curds are a staple of the family's diet. She slices them into squares with a long thread. Then they'll be dried in the sun on the roof of the ger. Look at the illustrations here. What does this tell you about life in Mongolia? About their way of life? Pretty simple and basic, isn't it? You don't see TVs and electronics and a lot of things distracting you, do you? We duck out through the low doorway of the ger to watch the catching of a horse that will be used for riding. A man rides out, standing up in the stirrups. He carries a 10-foot-long pole with a rope loop called an Arag. He plunges into the galloping herd and with a lightning-quick flip of the loop snags a horse. The rider reins in his horse, pulling the lassoed horse up short. It is then tethered at the ewe, a long rope suspended like a clothesline between two poles. The rider heads out into the herd again. This time the horses come straight at us. We don't know which way to go. Luckily, the herd, now only a few feet away, veers sharply to the left just as the rider lassos another horse. During the summer, the mares are milked every 2 hours. Mares are female horses. One of the older boys leads a foal to his mother and lets the young horse begin to nurse. After a few moments, the foal is pulled away and some of the mare's milk is collected in a bucket. Then the foal is allowed to finish nursing. We each take a turn churning the mare's milk in the big plastic drum. The milk must be churned 1,000 times or more to start the fermentation that will turn it into an Arag. A new batch of Arag is started every evening. The fresh milk is added throughout the day. Remember, Arag is like a cheese. Out in front of the ger, Grandpa shows Tamir how to fix a bridle, so that we also talk about the stallions that will compete in the Naadam. Grandpa tells us a racehorse must have a narrow forehead, wide chest, flat back, and strong, slim legs. The racehorses receive a special care starting months before the race. They are kept separated from the herd and tied up at a ewe. They are fed special grasses. Like boys and girls everywhere in Mongolia, Tamir dreams of bringing honor, glory, and prizes to his family by winning the big race. Now only 1 week away. It's evening and time to sweat up the horses to get them in shape for the race. Tamir is given a leg up by his father and then rides in a circle to warm up his mount. Gingu! In wailing, high-pitched voices, Tamir and the other young jockeys sing the traditional pre-race song to encourage the horses. The jockeys then ride toward the horizon until they are almost out of sight. Finally, the horses turn. Gree! The jockeys scream to make the horses run faster. Gree! With the short wood and leather crops called terrashes, the jockeys urge their horses to a full gallop. In a swirl of dust and thundering hooves, they race by us. Near the gers, the jockeys slow the horses to a walk and cool them down. The horses are tied up and the sweat is scraped from their coats with long, flat sticks called hushers. Then the horses are groomed and watered. At 11 o'clock, the night the sun finally sets. The stars appear. The family is snug in its gers. Smokes drift from the chimneys, and we curl up in sleeping bags in our tent and listen to the river. Tomorrow the cows and goats must again be herded in for milking. The mares milked every 2 hours, and the racehorses sweated up and pampered. It doesn't sound like an easy job, does it? The day before. It's the day before the Naadam. The jockeys with their trainers are camped in the hills surrounding the town where the Naadam is being held. Tamir's father is with us in a minivan. We scan the hills looking for Tamir's camp. His father worries about his son's ability to control the stallion. Even though the name Tamir means strength, the horses go wherever it wants, his father says. We stop at camp to ask directions. We are welcomed by a group of men dressed in silk deals tied with long, colorful sashes, and they invite us into a tiny nylon tent. There's no room for us in there, we whisper to Betsy. You must squeeze in, she replies. It's a big honor to be invited. So we squeeze in. The front opening is filled with curious onlookers. An old man offers us a bowl of homemade liquor brewed from the milk of the sheep, cows, and goats. It's warm. It warms our stomachs, making us feel very much at home. A little boy crawls into the tent. He is the jockey who will ride the old man's horse in the Naadam. The boy grins at us, puffing out his chest and showing off. After 2 bowls of the warming drink, we reluctantly leave. We are still looking for the right camp. Soon Tamir's father spots it on a distant hillside. So why do you think it's important for Lewin and Betsy to enter the tent and drink what is offered to them? What does that show? We join Tamir's group and sit with the men and jockeys. Curds, Arag, and dried mutton are passed around. The jockeys eat heartily and joke with one another. Tamir is quiet, though. He is thinking about the big race. After their meal, the men tie the horses' tails for decoration and keep the tails from getting in the way of the other horses when they race. The mounted jockeys then circle the campsite, singing, "Geering!" and ride out across the steppe for one last sweat up before the Naadam. The jockeys and their trainers will spend the night at the horse camp. We leave them at 10 o'clock and return to the nearby gear camp where we're staying. The sky is still bright blue and full of billowing clouds as our minivan drives along. We pass lines of mounted nomads, racehorses in tow, heading toward the town. The Naadam. Amra wakes us at 4 the next morning and we arrive in town before sunrise. In the distance we hear the high-pitched strains of Gingu as the jockeys sing to their horses and circle the Ewa. Their wailing makes our hair stand on end. Soon, groups of jockeys with their trainers gather in the rose-colored light of the rising sun. It is the first race of the day, Tamir's race. The racers gather at the finish line. They will ride their horses at a walk 14 miles across the Gobi to the starting line, then race back here. The trainers take the lead carrying tugs, which are long staffs topped with flowering white horsetails. The jockeys bunch up behind the leaders, and the procession starts off, leading toward a distant mountain peak. Almost looks like a parade, doesn't it? A jeep flying a big Mongolian flag brings up the rear of the group. The insistent beep, beep, beep of its horn herds the horses. Betsy tells us that the man in the jeep with the bullhorn is yelling, "Keep in line, go to the left, keep up." We follow along in our minivan. The sun rises, bathing the procession of brightly colored costumed riders in brilliant light. The riders pass a herd of curious camels. Suddenly, one of the horses bolts forward and takes off. It's Tamir's horse. Tamir pulls on the reins, struggling to control his mount. "Keep in line," he bellows, the man with the bullhorn, but Tamir disappears in the dust. There goes Tamir. So how does that make you feel as you read about when a horse takes off at this important moment? Was he supposed to take off at that particular moment? So how does that affect our experience reading this book? What does it let you know about these horses? An hour later, the jeep pulls ahead of the racers to a point 14 miles from the finish line. A man holding a bright red flag jumps from the jeep, draws a line in the sand with a staff, and jams the flag into the ground. This is the starting line. We wonder what's happened to Tamir. In a cloud of dust, we see the first horses approaching. To our relief, we spot Tamir in the middle of the pack. He's gotten control of the stallion. The horses are supposed to come all the way to the starting line and then go on a signal. But the minute the horses see the red flag, they know it's time to run. They bolt, turn, and head back to the finish line. The jockeys cannot hold them. Not one of the horses made it to the starting line. So they just take off without any gun going off or anything. The minute they saw the flag, they were gone. The race has begun. Pandemonium. What does pandemonium mean? Chaos? Guree, guree! The wild screams of the jockeys blend with the horses' shrilled whinnies. The ground trembles and shakes as they race across the gobi. Dust envelops the little jockeys and their horses, and we can no longer see them. We run to our waiting minivan, where Amra has Mongolian hip-hop music blaring from the radio. We slam the doors and buckle up. It's a rough, bumpy, zigzagging ride as we speed back to the finish line. We try to imagine what it must feel like to race at full gallop on one of these half-wild horses. Already the finish line is filled with nomads sitting on the ground, on horseback and atop a finish line tower. The horses whinny and snort. The crowd is alive with excitement and anticipation. Attendants on horseback hold colored wooden pegs painted with numbers. They will join the riders and take the horses' reins after they pass the finish line, giving each rider a peg to indicate his or her place number. Number 1, 2, 3. We find a spot to sit on the ground behind the rope barrier. Tamir's father joins us. All eyes are focused on the oncoming cloud of dust. The dust cloud gets larger and larger. Soon we see black specks floating in the heat, shimmering. The specks magically become horses and riders. The crowd strains forward. The pounding of hooves grows louder as the lead horse and jockey emerge. The stallions are at full gallop, lathered in sweat. "Guree, guree!" screams a jockey, flailing away with his tusher. It's Tamir. The crowd goes wild as he crosses the finish line. Tamir's father grins from ear to ear. His son has lived up to his name. His son has shown great strength. His son has won the race. "He's number 1, we shout, proud to share this moment with the young horseman and his family. Tamir's attendant rides alongside and takes the reins. More riders race out of the dust in groups of 2, 3, and 4. On and on they come until the last horse crosses the finish line. We call that horse the one with the wealthy stomach, says Betsy, because he's fat and out of shape. The first race of the day is over. There is great jubilation as Tamir rides into his camp. This horse has run races before. Last year's victory medal, tied to its forehead, glints in the sun. Tamir is very serious, all the young jockeys are. After dismounting, he is given a ceremonial sip of Arag by his father. Then Tamir poses for a winner's picture with his family, all dressed in their finest deals. When the celebrating ends, Tamir walks around the camp with his hat over his face, acting silly like a 9-year-old would. It says, if there's jubilation as Tamir is returning, what do you think has happened? How do you think he's feeling and reacting in reaching his goal? The horses are here. Look, the horses are here. The last race is over. The crowd surges forward to see the grand parade of winning horses and proud jockeys. The jockeys circle the field twice, then line up facing the crowd. An elder standing in the stirrups of his saddle praises the horses with a long rolling song. He sings into a microphone, and the song booms from loudspeakers. The horses are decorated with medals, and the jockeys are kissed by the officials. The owner of the horses are given ceremonial bowls of Arags and their prizes, medals hanging from colorful ribbons, rugs, and other traditional gifts. Nowadays, even non-traditional items such as television sets and motorbikes are sometimes included as prizes. It's the end of the Naadam in this little Mongolian town. As the ceremonies come to a close, the young jockeys ride off on their horses that have brought them and their families so much honor and glory. We close our eyes and hear for one last time their haunting horse song, Gingaroo, Gingaroo, Gingaroo. And here's just some Mongolian facts. I'll pass the book around if you'd like to see it. You could ask for it today. All right, so after the horses race, the people celebrate. And they have a big celebration. What do you think the ceremonies tell you about the importance of this tradition in Mongolia to their people? What does that tell you about them and why it's so important?